You notice it first in the gap between breaths. The room is not silent. The refrigerator hums, traffic drips in the distance, but something underneath the noise is steady, like a lake beneath wind. This is what stillness sounds like when it begins to speak. Not a command, not a sermon, just a tone you recognize as the one honest thing in a crowded day. Your thoughts keep lining up with clipboards, always ready to take attendance. What you said earlier, what you'll say next, who's judging you, what the clock is stealing. But tonight, some part of you is curious about the interval that thoughts can't reach. Not the grand spiritual thing, not a magic trick, just the moment the mind blinks and reality beams through. If you stare there long enough, a small courage rises and doubt shifts its weight. In a lab across town, the night shift glows in blue. A researcher leans over an fMRI console, watching attention behave like weather. The graph doesn't care about backstory or reputation. It cares about signal and noise. Neurons fire, blood flows. The image maps a choreography of focus and drift. When the volunteer is asked to count their breaths, the signal sharpens. When asked to plan tomorrow's apology, the signal frays. None of this is mystical. It's measurement. And it suggests something quietly radical. Coherence arrives when noise stops steering you. You don't need a scan to test that. Your kitchen counter will do. Place your keys down. Watch the hand that places them. Notice the tiny arc, the metal touching wood, the faint ring that spreads into the room like a wave. You move like a wave. You decide like a witness. There is no immediate prize for paying attention, just the fact that you are there to witness your life without the crude compression of habit. That already is an upgrade. Thoughts insist on being the narrator. They rush in with loud certainty. You are late. You are behind. You are the wrong kind of person for this century. But a thought is a draft, not an order. You can read it and not obey. Try this as an experiment. Imagine each thought as a particle of dust floating in a sunbeam. The beam is awareness. The dust is movement. You cannot stop the dust. You also don't have to breathe it in. Observation is a form of participation. You choose what your attention will entangle with, and that choice writes a real contour in your day. Somewhere inside, a memory strings a small electric light across a dark alley. You remember a time when you dealt with a hard conversation by pausing half a second longer than usual before speaking. In that half second, the map redrew itself. Your usual road toward defensiveness dropped away. Another road flickered to life. Every decision is a small collapse of possibility, and in that half second you allowed the better world to be the one that solidified. Not because you're saintly, but because you gave reality space to present a better offer. The streets after midnight are a good classroom. A delivery bike slips by plastic bags, catching the air like silver fish. A couple argues softly at the curb, their words softened by fatigue, louder in their own skulls than in the night. Steam lifts from a manhole, each plume a breath that never learned to hurry. Your body understands the lesson without a lecture. When pace slows, contours sharpen. The mind's quantum noise, the little static and click of opinion and fear, keeps trying to annotate everything. But the city's metronome keeps you honest. One step another. You let attention fall onto the rhythm like a coin on a drum. The sound is round and plain. There is peace in simple percussion. Inside the apartment again, you set a glass of water on the table. Condensation beads. Each drop looks like a universe waiting for its first star. Then gravity takes a vote. One drop descends, leaving a clear trail. Uncertainty is the room where freedom breathes. You don't control outcomes, not really. But you shape the room by the way you stand. If you lean toward fear, your choices stack like narrow bricks. If you lean toward presence, the wall becomes a window. People sell presence like a product. You know better. Presence is a posture you recall by practicing tiny verifications. Test your doubt by choosing a single minute in which you will not negotiate with yourself. Set a quiet timer if you must. In that minute, savor the texture of your own attention. Watch your brain. Try to turn this into an achievement. Let it. Then notice the part that doesn't need achievement to justify being alive. That part has depth, it has patience, and it has always been waiting for you. Science is not threatened by this inward turn. Scientists live on good questions. A good question is a clean lens. The brain is a prediction machine. The world mostly is manageable because you guess what's coming and you're right enough to survive. But when stress climbs, prediction narrows. The future tightens into a noose of overly certain stories. This will fail, that person will leave. I will embarrass myself. Stillness expands the prediction window. It doesn't promise safety, it gives you room to update. It's the opposite of superstition. Instead of insisting the world fit your old model, you let the model relax until it can fit the world. There's a lab experiment you can run alone in a chair. It's about time. Sit and close your eyes for 60 seconds, but don't count. Just observe breath, hum little sensations. When you open your eyes, guess how long it was. Often if you were agitated, it felt longer than 60. If you were absorbed, it felt shorter. Time inside the skull stretches and compresses with attention. The external clock doesn't care. The internal one writes your experience. If you can tilt attention deliberately, gentle focus on sensation, on breath, on the weight of your body, felt time softens. This is not magic. It's perception. It's the felt physics of your life. You may worry that relaxing into stillness means losing your edge. That without the crackle of anxiety, you'll stop caring, stop striving. But think of archers and musicians. Their best shots arrive when they're neither limp nor clenched. The bow is drawn, but not to the point of trembling. The cello string is taut, but not to the point of snapping. Coherence is the art of right tension, and you can feel when you found it. Your breath lengthens, your eyes widen, your thinking becomes simple and surprisingly kind. You can want excellence and still forgive yourself. You can work hard without making stress your identity. There is a physics to attention, the way there is a physics to rivers. What you look at gains mass. Attention entangles you with what you notice, and the tie is stronger than it appears. Do you want to strengthen your relationship? Attend to what's healthy in it, and you'll find the scatter of resentment has less grip. Do you want to break a habit? Attend to the first 5 seconds when the urge arises. Most of the habit lives there. In those 5 seconds, you are still in superposition, able to become the one who reaches for the phone or the one who doesn't. Not easy, but simple. One evening, an old physics professor holds office hours, the kind that bleed past midnight while the campus goes quiet. A student confesses that the math is not the hardest part. The hardest part is believing that the mind doing the math is allowed to be here. The professor smiles and taps the board with the chalk. Observation changes the experiment, he says, including the experiment called you. When you observe yourself with hostility, your behavior shapes around that hostility. When you observe with accuracy and care, you invite a different trajectory. This is the gentle scandal of self-honesty. It works. You pour tea. The steam climbs, and you remember a childhood afternoon when you watched dust turn gold in a square of sun. You didn't try to capture it. You just knew it was good. That sensation is not childish. It's practice. Quiet wonder is not a personality trait. It's a skill you strengthen by staying, by noticing, by letting small details carry more weight than loud conclusions. Thoughts will keep auditioning for the role of judge. You're not required to hire them. Doubt has a voice. It says, if you slow down, you'll fall behind. If you trust quiet, you'll miss your chance. If you stop planning for disaster, disaster will punish you. Test that. In one small area today, act as though the quieter hypothesis could be true, that a kinder pace could yield cleaner results. Write the email without the defensive paragraph. Start the task without the pre-argument in your head. Notice what happens. You're collecting data, not pledging allegiance. At the park under winter branches, 2 kids experiment with gravity, tossing leaves and chasing the spin. Their laughter hangs like temporary lanterns. Your brain considers whether to join with a smile or retreat into protection. But curiosity has already tilted you toward them. You don't have to perform joy. You can be a quiet audience. It is enough to stand under the tree and remember that small beings are proof that order can bloom from noise without your supervision. Entropy increases, yes. The system trends toward scatter. But little islands of coherence emerge with care and attention. Families, friendships, long projects. These are rooms you heat on purpose. Someone once told you that uncertainty is an enemy to be defeated. But watch the artist hesitate above the canvas, the programmer hover over the last function, the chef pause before the salt. That moment, uncertain alert, is where intelligence breathes. When stillness speaks louder than your thoughts, you wake into that room. You don't have to kill doubt. You ask it to shrink to its correct size. Doubt can be a smoke alarm, not a dictator. Return to the kitchen. Put your phone on the table face down for 2 minutes. It will shout though it doesn't move. Your body will reach though you told it not to. This too is an experiment. What you feel in those seconds is the residual echo of every design decision made to train your brain toward compulsive check-ins. No need for blame. Just notice the tug. The tug is a measurement. It shows you the field between thoughts humming quietly and how strong your gravity must be to stand inside it without leaving. On the desk, your to-do list sits like a busy mirror. Half the items are actual tasks. The other half are slogans you use to qualify for your own approval. Work remains, but the way you relate to the work is the work. Choose a single item and dissect it with a lab's neutrality. What is the next concrete action? What can be done in 3 minutes? What is waiting for permission from someone who isn't coming? When you bring observation to the mess reacts. It's not mystical. It's physics, feedback loops, thresholds, the small collapse of vague dread into specific motion. Walking down your hallway, you drag fingers along the wall. The cool paint returns you to your body. Memory unspools slowly, and you see a younger you standing in a doorway, scared to speak. The older you wants to rescue, to rewrite history with a more elegant script. But look again. Even then you were choosing in microseconds. Even then you were balancing signal and noise. Maybe you didn't say the perfect thing, but you kept showing up in imperfect rooms. That counts. Confidence is not the volume at which you speak, but the fidelity of your attention to what matters. Sometimes the mind opens like a window. Sometimes it's more like a rusty hinge. On the hinge days, small rituals help. A bit of sweeping, washing a single cup, making the bed with a crisp line. People mock these things because they look like compliance. But measured correctly, they are micro-labs. You apply a little order and watch your system's state change. It's not the act, it's the feedback. You become a person who can make a tiny, precise difference and feel it ripple. That allows for bigger differences later. I could tell you that breath practice is powerful, and you likely know it is. But knowledge changes nothing without sensation. Put a hand on your chest and another on your stomach. Inhale, so your lower hand rises first. Exhale more slowly than you inhaled. Repeat 5 times. This simple asymmetry nudges your nervous system toward parasympathetic territory. The number of breaths per minute drops. The internal alarms dim. Coherence isn't a mysterious glow. It's a measurable alignment between what your biology does and what your life asks for. When they line up, you feel like a river that found its bed. A friend calls to say they're lost not in the geographical way, but in the way that can make a sunny day feel like a locked room. You listen without solving. This is another form of attention that changes outcomes. The urge to fix is a way to quiet your own discomfort. The willingness to witness is a way to widen theirs until breathing becomes possible. You offer a sentence as simple as a glass of water. I'm here. They cry not because a solution appeared, but because the field of their pain expanded enough to include a little air. You hang up and learn again that love often sounds like restraint. The city shifts. A bus exhales. You pass a convenience store where the fluorescent light gives everything the same pale verdict. Inside, the cashier rubs their eyes and recenters a rack of gum. On the bulletin board, a faded flyer advertises a community science night. You imagine showing up surrounded by makeshift telescopes, kids pointing at a moon so bright it looks engineered. You picture the quiet hush when someone focuses the lens correctly and a crater leaps into view, the sharp rim, the soft interior shadows telling time in black and white. In that hush, nobody is cool. Everyone remembers what it's like to be startled into tenderness. Back home, you open a notebook. The first line is always the hardest because it claims a direction from a superposition of directions. You write one true sentence, "I am here." The second sentence can circle the drain as long as it needs, as long as it returns to the drain's center. The point is not literary brilliance. It's an instrument reading. Today's weather, scattered thoughts, periods of clarity, wind from the future, slight chance of grace. Even reading it back, you feel a little hum of permission. The observer in you has not left. Test your doubt again with something tiny. Commit to 10 minutes of deep work on the project you've been orbiting like a nervous satellite. Nothing dramatic. Turn off the notifications. Place both feet on the ground. Begin with the smallest unit that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. As you work, notice the threshold where you want to flee. Name it. That is the precise point where your brain predicts discomfort and tries to skip to relief. If you stay even for 60 seconds, the prediction updates. Over time, this is how you become someone trustable to yourself. In physics, noise isn't evil. It's part of the system. Some noise carries information. Some is simply interference. Your job isn't to sterilize your life. It's to distinguish. Cold anxiety before a meaningful leap can be signal. Constant rumination about imaginary verdicts is interference. Measure by outcomes. After the jitter passes, do you feel widened or diminished? If diminished, it's noise. If widened, it's a threshold. This kind of evaluation takes practice and humor. You won't get it right every time, but the ratios will improve. You picture the mind as a room with a radio always on. Most days you let the volume set itself. Tonight you touch the dial. The voice is thin. Behind them you hear a quieter broadcast, the sound of your breath moving like tide, the faint tick of a clock, the distance between two raindrops landing on the sill. That distance is a classroom where time stops poor-mouthing you and begins to cooperate. You don't need to be dramatic to enter it. You need to be accurate. A streetlight flickers caught between wave and particle, or that's how you describe it when your poetry outruns your engineering. You smile and correct yourself, it's just faulty wiring. But the habit of description matters because it reveals your loyalties. Do you describe your life as a chain of emergencies or a sequence of experiments where the variables love to play? If the latter failure becomes information instead of indictment, this is not a trick to avoid responsibility. It's a protocol to keep learning possible. There is a person you pass often in the stairwell. Today you say hello as though the word weighs something, and you are strong enough to lift it. The person smiles in relief as though they've been carrying a heavier thing all day, and your hello helped a little. Small entanglements like this are not sentimental. They tune the field we live in. The story that says you are separate is not wrong, it's just incomplete. At the scale of daily life, we are instruments in the same orchestra, out of tune alone, surprising together. You sit back down and notice the internal narrator trying to claim a trophy for being insightful. You pat it on the head and move on. Insight is a beginning, not a monument. The test is always in behavior, in how you speak to a tired barista, in whether you keep your promise to yourself when it's no longer fashionable, in the way you metabolize regret without turning it into identity. You will fail at these tests, and then pass, and then fail like weather. Stillness keeps you from overreacting to any single report. It steadies the long arc. Consider how the day's inputs accumulate in the body. Scrolling gives you a sugar high of novelty with a crash of fatigue. Conversation with a friend gives you a slow release of safety. Work that costs you something but yields a clean corner of progress leaves you pleasantly spent, like a runner who made it to the next tree. Map your inputs with the honesty of a scientist and the tenderness of a good host. What you consume is the lab you live in. What you offer is the experiment you run on the world. By now the house is quieter. The hum of appliances, the faint hiss of plumbing, the settling of wooden beams into the night, they're not distractions but coordinates. You return to the glass of water, now room temperature surface, flat and dark, like a small lake. If you hold your breath and lean in, you'll see your face distort at the edges, then settle into something recognizably yours. The mind does that too, distorts at the edges. When you rush, returns to itself. When you linger, you learn to trust the return. The future waits like a closed door down a lit hallway. Inside, some version of you is already moving. Having made choices you will soon call your own. You can't see the details, but the room's tone will be shaped by what you practice now. Practice attention, and the room will feel spacious. Practice suspicion, and the room will feel tight. Practice kindness, and the room will greet you like a friend who saw you coming from a long way off and saved you a seat by the window. You realize you've been breathing easier for the past few minutes. The clock didn't slow. Your nervous system did. From the outside, nothing is altered. From the inside, everything is rearranged by a few degrees. Turn any map a few degrees, and you end up in a different town. The town you're headed toward tonight is called Enough. It's quiet there, but not empty. People build things carefully and talk to each other as though it matters, because it does. You stand and stretch, and there is a sensation of being in your body that is both ordinary and rare, like seeing a familiar street after the rain has washed it clean. Your shoulders drop one rib's distance. Your jaw forgets it has to guard the gates. The night gives you back a piece of yourself you didn't realize you had pawned. Gratitude rises thin and clear, not performative, just factual. That is the beginning of a kind of intelligence they don't grade in school, but everyone recognizes when they feel it. Beneath everything, the world keeps making invitations. A stray cat considers collapsing the space between you and then decides against it. A cloud drifts past the moon and you learn something about contrast that no book could write. A neighbor coughs. A train horn leans into the dark. Your own curiosity returns like an old friend with better posture. The invitations aren't loud. They're specific. They ask for the part of you that refuses to pretend and refuses to rush. Night gathers itself. On the table, your phone remains face down, and you feel a quiet pride that is not brittle, the kind you can hold without it slipping into arrogance. Somewhere, a door closes softly. You hear even that as an argument for gentleness, the way the latch meets the frame, with respect, not drama. Stillness speaks in such tones. It doesn't shout. It makes a clear space in which true things can also be quiet. You sit again and close your eyes, not to escape, but to measure. Breath in, breath out. An image rises of a field at dusk, crickets tuning the air, the last light pooling behind a line of trees. The field between thoughts hums quietly, and in that hum, you remember something practical. You do not have to believe every thought that arrives wearing urgency. You can ask it to take off its shoes at the door and speak in a normal tone. If it refuses, it can wait on the porch. The quantum metaphors are just that, metaphors, but they help. They remind you that possibility precedes decision, that attention steers outcomes, that uncertainty isn't an error, but a condition for creativity. You don't need to wave a wand, you need to listen. When the mind's noise lowers, you can hear the choices that were always there. You rest in superposition until choice defines you, and the choice can be gentle. The tea is cool now. You take a sip anyway, and the mundane kindness of lukewarm comfort slides down your throat. You set the cup beside the glass, two small planets sharing an orbit. The night outside continues, full of situations you cannot see. But here in this room, you are conducting a quiet experiment whose results will show up in your face tomorrow, in your posture, in your first words, to the first person you meet. No audience is necessary, no announcement, just a clean measurement at a human scale. You breathe again, and the room feels bigger. There is space to move without knocking into old conclusions. Doubt still exists, but its wardrobe has changed. It no longer dresses as your boss. It mutters from a chair in the corner occasionally. right off and dramatic, rarely helpful. You nod to it as you would to a neighbor who likes to complain about the weather. "I hear you," you say, and you continue assembling your life with the parts that are within reach. If you were to step outside right now, the air would tell you the same story. The room is telling the story that the world did not give up on you and is waiting for your slower, truer entrance. A car passes a leaf, skitters the sky, holds a complexity you can bear, because you are not required to solve it alone. You are required, if required, is the word to meet it with a steadier kind of attention. A presence that neither clings nor flinches. You can do that. You're doing it. The mind tries one last gambit. It asks for a guarantee. You smile. Guarantees are for warranties and closed systems. You are neither. But probabilities improve with practice, and you are practicing. When stillness speaks louder than your thoughts, you wake not once, not dramatically, but in increments. Wake in the middle of a sentence. Wake in the middle of a pattern. Wake while washing a cup or tying a shoe or turning off a light. Wake long enough to let the next right thing be small and clear. You stand and turn the lamp a fraction lower. Shadows rearrange their furniture politely. The house settles with a contented sigh. You make a path to the door, without looking, muscle memory guiding you with a soft authority. On the other side, the hallway waits, unhurried, dim, honest. You place your hand on the knob and pause, not to hesitate, but to feel the metal cool against your skin. The experiment continues. The numbers are good, and in the hush that follows you, hear it again, the tone beneath the noise, steady and kind, just before you step into the hall. You step into the hall and the floor cools your feet. A small truth you can trust. Air presses gently against your skin. For a second, the building feels like a living thing with a slow pulse, pipes ticking like a distant clock. The door drifts shut behind you with a polite click. The tone beneath the noise follows not as a soundtrack, but as a baseline you can return to when the melody gets busy. A neighbor's bike leans against the banister. A single red reflector catches the hallway light and throws a tiny flare onto the wall, a private sunrise. You pause, put 2 fingers on the seat, and steady it. No one will know you did. The gesture is less about virtue than calibration. Your nervous system takes a reading. You can influence the small zone you occupy. The reading is good. You descend the stairs and feel the micro adjustments in your ankles, the subtle corrections of balance your conscious mind never narrates. Each step is a quiet equation solved by flesh and gravity. At the landing, a window shows a slice of street, a taxi idling a canopy of leaves like green glass in the sodium light, someone crossing with a grocery bag that swings like a pendulum. The bag marks time. You remember that clocks began as tools for cooperation, sailors and monks, merchants and astronomers, aligning their actions through shared measures. Tonight, your measure is simpler, breath, step, sight. Outside, the air carries traces of rain not yet fallen. The city, stripped of daytime performances, reveals its scaffolding of needs: nourishment, shelter, attention. A baker balances trays in a bright back room. A security guard cups a coffee, especially close, warming more than their hands. The stillness here is not a vacuum. It's a mesh that holds the weight without comment. You join it, hands in pockets, pace untheatrical. Your thoughts try for the microphone. You let them line up and speak in order, 1 sentence each, as if testifying under oath. When they're finished, nothing catastrophic happens. The quiet remains. At the corner, a crosswalk light clicks from red to white, and you watch a stray dog obey it with better manners than most drivers. The animal moves with an economy of purpose learned from many nights. You feel yourself entangle slightly with its caution and competence. Attention entangles you with what you notice. This tether can be a burden or a bomb. You choose carefully where to tie your rope. A few blocks over, a university lab is still awake. Through the glass, you can see a graduate student performing a last pass on a simple experiment, tapping a button when a light blinks, then trying again while listening to a human conversation. The results are predictable, and still fresh. Attention split is attention thinned. The student stares at the chart and shakes their head, because the fact is unromantic and stubborn. Performance drops. Error bars widen. The data doesn't accuse, it asks. What world do you want to build in your head? One with a single clean beam, or 3 weak flashlights pointed in different directions? The student logs the final trial and turns off the monitor. The lab hum softens. The test is over. The lesson portable. You cut through a small playground where a swing hangs, skewed, its chain twisted half a turn. You sit and let your weight correct the twist, slowly rotating back to neutral. It's a minor act of coherence. Return the simple object to the center it was designed for, and notice how the air seems to approve. Coherence arrives when noise stops steering you, but also when your actions line up with the structure already present. You can't make the whole city tidy. You can unfurl a taut chain. Somewhere between swing and sidewalk, you recall a conversation you once avoided because you were certain it would end badly. With time, you attempted it anyway, and the outcome was not generous, but it was real. Uncertainty, you realize, is not the opposite of safety. It's the condition under which truth can appear. In physics, uncertainty sets a limit. In life, it sets a stage. Your doubt predicted catastrophe. Reality delivered a smaller, usable difficulty. You survived with better information about who you are and what lines you won't cross. The map sharpens. The fear loses costume jewelry and becomes a simple warning sign. You move again. A bus glides past windows glowing with late shift faces, a nurse tired to the bone and still alert enough to hold the rail for a stranger. A guy in a paint-splattered hoodie staring into inventor's space. A woman scrolling through photos of a garden you can almost smell. You imagine the invisible threads between them, entanglements. Not mystical, but human favors. Done debts, forgiven stories borrowed. The city's field extends around you, an atmosphere of interdependent choices. The question isn't whether you affect it. The question is how. A drizzle begins, delicate as dust. The street changes. Voice hiss on asphalt, ping on dumpster lid. A lattice of tiny impacts writing tonight's pattern. You pull up your hood not as armor, but as a bell that gathers your warmth. The rain sharpens edges. You had missed the smell of wet metal, the darkening of bark. The neon sign, suddenly twice as bright in reflection. You watch your mind try to convert the moment into a story about getting soaked, getting sick, getting set back. Then you watch that story collapse when you step under a small overhang and the rain becomes something to hear rather than resist. A man, under the same awning, nods. He asks the time. You tell him. For a few breaths, you share the ancient unit of people waiting together, older than clocks, older than doors. You don't solve each other's lives. You stand shoulder to shoulder in exact agreement about a simple fact: rain falls, you wait, you're not alone. When the shower eases, you push off the wall and wish him a good night in a voice that trusts he has earned it. Back home, the apartment greets you with the smell of books, clean laundry, and the thin electrical scent of devices asleep. Your phone, still face down, emits a faint buzz that sounds louder than thunder, precisely because you've cultivated quiet. You turn it over. 3 notifications audition for relevance. You let them pass. You realize how often you've let urgency pick you up by the collar. Tonight, it doesn't have that grip. You decide to read instead. You choose a science essay with salt in it, the kind that neither flatters nor humiliates the reader. The author describes a long-term attention study, people trained to sustain focus, not by suppressing distraction, but by recognizing it quickly and returning with less friction each time. The skill is not iron will, it's gentle recovery. The graph shows fewer seconds lost to detours. The author quotes, "No mystics offers no miracles, just a steady decline in wasted motion and an increase in depth of work." You close the book with the feeling of having met a trustworthy witness. You set the book aside and look at your desk as if it were a small lab bench. Everything on it begs to be a variable: pen, lamp paper, small screw you've been meaning to return to its proper place. You choose a single variable and move it. The space changes, not dramatically, but enough to show you that environments are hypotheses and you can test them. You arrange the lamp so its pool of light does not glare in your eyes. You reduce the friction between you and what matters by a quarter inch. You feel the difference. Then you write. Not much 500 words of unremarkable truth about a problem you've been treating like a ghost. The problem is less powerful when named. You write, "I am avoiding this because I'm afraid of performing badly," and the sentence sits like a broken lock on the table, visible and fixable. Most of avoidance is pretense. Most of effort is a return to accurate measures. Once named, the thing doesn't vanish. It becomes buildable. You sketch a plan with modest actions and generous margins. You sense the mind's quantum noise skittering objections, dramatic forecasts rising. You let it rise and pass. The plan remains. Your tea is cold again. You drink it like medicine. When you set the mug down, your hand lingers on the ceramic. The warmth, though nearly gone, surprises you into smiling. You think of how bodies carry evidence, micro-tremors after a near-miss slower heart, after a kind exchange, a subtle lift in the corners of the mouth after completing a small task. There is no need to pose. The biology tells the truth. The biology doesn't care about applause. Later you lie on the floor for a minute, because horizontal can reset the whole board. A ceiling crack looks like a river on an old map. You track it with a finger in the air. You breathe like a person who isn't auditioning for anything. In this position with the world stacked above you, you feel a familiar thought. Try to build a case for failure. It argues like an overconfident lawyer, loud, dramatic, shallow. You let it finish. Then you ask a single question. What's the smallest verifiable action I can take from here? The thought has no prepared response for small. It dissolves, leaving a gap you fill with an action the size of a breath. The clock moves. You review the day with a forensic kindness. Where did you over-index on performance? Where did you under-index on presence? You find a couple of scenes and adjust without self-scorch. Learning works better in cooperative environments, even inside your own head. You close your eyes and see a dim theater of fragments, doorknob, bus face, swing chain dog crossing at the light. Your mind stores them as reference tools, textures to return to when you forget how to stand inside your life. Then memory shifts you to an older scene. A classroom with blinds half open, chalk dust in a column of sun. A teacher drawing a curve that approaches a line and never meets it. Limits. You didn't understand much then except the aesthetic of approach, the way getting closer is its own kind of contact. That principle applies. Here perfection is the line. Your practice is the curve. You will not hit the line. But you can close the gap by orders of magnitude. The closing is a romance worth committing to. The metaphor extends in certain light. Your life behaves like a waveform carrying energy, distributing influence across time. In other moments, you make discrete moves like a particle, this choice, not that. The duality is not a contradiction. It's a generous model of how complicated beings navigate. Be a wave when generosity is called for spreading calm over a room. Be a particle when decision is due, collapsing the indecision into motion with a click you can hear in your chest. On your phone screen, a text from a friend waits like a small lamp. They ask if you're awake. You are. You answer with a line so simple it takes courage to send. I'm here if you need. They call. You listen while they pour out a week's worth of knots. When it's your turn to speak, you offer only what you can verify: their competence, their clear record of surviving your unglamorous willingness to stay. You do not hijack the story with a speech. Observation changes the experiment, including the experiment called two people on a line, each carrying the other's weight for a few minutes. When the call ends, your chest feels roomier. Past midnight now, the building has settled into full hush. You open the window a crack. Air moves across your face with the dignity of something older than argument. The city is a soft constellation of rectangles. Somewhere a couple reconciles. Somewhere else someone decides they cannot stay. Collapses of possibility occur without witnesses. You don't need to know them all. It's enough to say yes to the small collapse in front of you. Sleep soon. But first, one more page, not to consume content, but to steady the bridge between waking and dreaming. The page tells a story about a field scientist walking transects across a meadow to count insects at dawn. The work is patient, repeatable, dull to anyone allergic to meaning. Patterns emerge over months. Fewer bees this year. More beetles. Parasitoid wasps shifting territory. The scientist doesn't panic loudly or ignore quietly. They gather, compare, share. They test their doubt by submitting it to a community that can refine it. You close the book and feel an earthy confidence. The world rewards careful witnesses. You think about your own transects, the routes you walk through a day, from bed to sink, from desk to window, from worry to the thing actually in front of you. You imagine counting not insects but returns, how often you return from distraction to task, from defensiveness to curiosity, from isolation to conversation. Without shaming yourself, you decide to raise your return rate by a small percent. A little more coherence each lap. A phrase arrives unsummoned. Make room for the better argument. You test it. The better argument is almost always the quieter one. It accounts for more variables and promises fewer miracles. It respects uncertainty and asks for participation. You write the phrase on a slip of paper and tuck it into your wallet, not as talisman but as prompt. The next time your mind throws a tantrum dressed as certainty, you'll present the better argument with a glass of water and a chair. Now your own better argument requests sleep. You resist for a minute because night is a rare teacher, and you hate to leave class early. You compromise lights, low, body, horizontal mind, permitted to stay a little awake, while muscle and bone begin their repairs. In the dark, sound swells. You hear the vague arithmetic of the building again. A door far away. A valve, adjusting the whisper of fabric against sheets. The body counts what it can, heartbeats, breaths. Soon it will count nothing at all and still do everything right. But not yet. One more scene. In the morning, you picture yourself at a bus stop with a cup of coffee you'll drink more slowly than usual. You will watch an older man fold a newspaper into a perfect rectangle, a skill he learned from a father who worked in a factory that measured to tolerances of a human hair. You will ask him about the fold, and he will show you, and both of you will perform a minor rite of precision in a world that often prefers spectacle. You will feel silly and correct at the same time. The day will begin with this. It will be enough. The sound of your breath changes and tells you the gates are opening. Before you walk through, you practice one more tiny act of citizenship. You thank the room in the language of action. You clear the stray screw at last. You rinse the mug. You draw the curtain a hand's breadth to invite morning softly. These are not chores tonight. They are declarations. I am here can be written with verbs. As you sink, your mind offers a final handful of quantum words, like lantern bugs, superposition, coherence, observation, collapse. You let them drift and dim, useful metaphors that did their job by pointing toward behaviors that reality will always reward. Pay attention, choose, precisely, return, kindly, accept uncertainty as a partner, not a prison. You do not need them now. You need only the simple vowel of a long exhale. Sleep comes in increments, not a gate, but a gradient. The body surrenders metabolically. The mind unclenches its fist one finger at a time. Yet even here you can measure something. The tone beneath the noise remains. It slows with you, hums with you, watches the stagehands remove the scenery for the next act. You are not in charge of that crew. You trust them anyway. Morning, when it arrives, will test you. There will be emails with sharp edges and people with mismatched speeds and headlines crafted to colonize your attention. You will forget and then remember and then forget again. But you carry a simple instrument now, the habit of pausing half a second longer than drama requires. In that interval, you can ask the better question: what's true? What's useful? What's kind? That's enough whip for a whole day. And if memory fails, if you find yourself tumbling through collisions of obligation and noise, recall a single concrete image from tonight. The swing returning to center, the dog waiting for the crosswalk, The reflector on the bike sending a borrowed sunrise onto the wall. Any will do. These are your calibration marks. The physics of attention is a local law. Apply it room by room. You turn on your side and tuck your hands under the pillow like a person who knows they belong here. In the space where language thins, a last thought lands, without insisting on being quoted. To wake is not to conquer. It is to cooperate with what is already willing to help. The air, the floor, the soft engine of the heart. The minds of other people choosing tonight and tomorrow to aim a little more care at their small zones. The field between thoughts will be there. When you need it, humming, patient, available to anyone who touches the dial and listens. You don't make a vow. You don't need one. You let the room take your weight, and the night take your words, and the body take its rightful turn at the controls. Doubt has not left. It has agreed to a smaller office. Stillness is not a throne. It is a bench you can share. You're not trying to be impressive anymore. You're trying to be accurate and kind in the same breath. The hallway outside holds whatever it holds. The neighbor's bike waits. The swing remembers center. The city rehearses another morning missteps and recoveries, experiments and reports. You'll join it soon, not to claim mastery, but to practice participation with a little more grace. When stillness speaks louder than your thoughts, you wake. Not with fireworks. With a door that closes quietly, a step that lands clean, and a question that lingers as gently as a hand on the knob. What would the next right small thing look like from here?